Welcome to All Theory, No Conspiracy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click to receive notifications, and leave a comment. Pharmaceutical drug manufacturers know the serious effects of opium addiction. Hong Kong became a British colony as a result of two wars, the First and Second Opium Wars. The First Opium War broke out in 1839. They are called the Opium Wars because the British were smuggling opium from their Indian colonies into Chinese ports against the wishes of the Chinese government. This illegal smuggling was also to help to pay for the large amounts of Chinese tea that they were importing. By the early 1800s, tea was a popular drink with the British public. Britain also wanted more control over their trade with China, as they could only trade with certain officials called Hmong merchants. The Opium Wars resulted in two treaties, each expanding the size of Britain's Hong Kong territory. These treaties were followed by a 99-year lease in 1898 that allowed Britain to control even more land, a lease that ran out in 1997. Over a century ago, scientists at a German pharmaceutical firm investigated a chemical modification to morphine that made it more palatable as a cough suppressant. In 1898, Bayer and Company introduced heroin as a pain reliever and cough suppressant. The company packaged and sold the drug in bottles. Its amber glass and colorful label presented heroin to customers as an effective, safe treatment. Although it worked against coughs caused by serious and then common diseases such as tuberculosis and pneumonia, physicians and pharmacists soon noticed a serious side effect. Patients required ever larger doses and were becoming increasingly dependent on the elixir. By 1912, it had emerged as a recreational drug among young men in New York City. 2 years later, addicts were knocking at hospital doors in search of treatment. Opiate addiction is so powerful because it triggers a response in the middle brain reward system. It prompts the release of dopamine, which is the same chemical released when we feel pleasure from eating or sex. It also makes an imprint on our brain in the form of a conditioned association, which compels people to seek out that feeling again. Most people will be predisposed to this insidious addiction, and the drug manufacturers know this. It creates a form of dependency and enslavement. Before the 1972 U.S. presidential elections, the Nixon administration began a pilot program in the District of Columbia where half the inmates in local jails tested positive for opiates. As treatment, including methadone, became available in the capital, crime did indeed drop. Another reason for finding solutions to drug use started half a world away in Vietnam, where studies found that up to a fifth of the American soldiers were addicted to heroin. Leslie Ike Atkinson was a U.S. Army Master Sergeant and convicted drug trafficker. He is believed to have been a major figure in smuggling heroin into the United States from Southeast Asia from about 1968 to 1975. The Cadaver Connection was a heroin smuggling operation involving the use of coffins containing dead American soldiers being shipped home for burial, bringing heroin into the United States for processing. Frank Lucas one of Atkinson's partners in the U.S., stated that this was how the narcotic was smuggled out of Thailand. Lucas was portrayed by Denzel Washington in the film American Gangster. Lucas was quoted as saying, "Ike flew a country boy North Carolina carpenter over to Bangkok. We had him make up 28 copies of the government coffins, except we fixed them up with false bottoms, big enough to load up with 6, maybe 8 kilos. It had to be snug. You couldn't have sliding around. Ike was very smart because he made sure we used heavy guys' coffins. He didn't put them in no skinny guys." Atkinson disputed Lucas's claims, saying they weren't making coffins and never used cadavers, but instead were making teak furniture to smuggle the heroin. Drug feared scent in the bodies of GIs. An 8-year smuggling conspiracy brought heroin into the United States inside the bodies of soldiers killed in Vietnam, according to testimony from military and customs men in federal court here. Heroin is known to be bought in kilogram lots in Thailand for $1,700, smuggled into the United States, sewn into the bodies of war victims, and then sold for up to $20,000 a kilogram, the authorities testified yesterday. Another article from Daily, which will also be linked in the description of this video, contains multiple articles depicting the same story in detail. Maher handled the prosecution of Thomas E. Sutherland, who posed as a member of the Army and was accused of hiding heroin inside the body bags of American soldiers who died in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. Mr. Maher, in asking for the maximum sentence, said that Sutherland had used an Army sergeant's disguise and false military papers as a functionary in the heroin rings. He said Sutherland had gone to Southeast Asia as a sergeant to make heroin contacts in Thailand. Mr. Maher said that heroin was smuggled into this country, stitched in the bodies of American war dead. A search of the bodies and the aircraft found no drugs, but officials said the bodies had fresh incisions where heroin may have been carried. Mr. Maher said it was believed the drug had been removed during a stopover at Honolulu, while the bodies were unattended. Other articles contain more information about Atkinson and Lucas's connection as well. Look to the war in Afghanistan and we find another similar story. The close link between U.S. military and covert intervention in drug trafficking continues in Afghanistan today. When it invaded and occupied the country in October 2001, Washington replaced the ruling Taliban with President Hamid Karzai and the Northern Alliance, a group of warlords whose armies are financed by growing and selling opium. Since then, opium production in Afghanistan has skyrocketed and is now the main economic activity in the country. Washington has been collaborating with narco-traffickers in its wars since 1943. These have included the Sicilian and Corsican Mafias, the Kuomintang in Burma, the Hmong in Laos, the Mujahadeen in Afghanistan between 1979 and 1989, and the Contras in Nicaragua. Today, Afghanistan provides 75% of the world's opium and is the leading global producer of both opium and heroin. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, poppies are being planted in an unprecedented 28 out of 32 Afghan provinces, up from 18 in 1999. In 2003, opium farming and trafficking brought $2.3 billion into the country, more than double the amount received in reconstruction aid, and constituted half of the economy. Fentanyl, Vicodin, and other synthetic opioids are the deadliest drug type. At least one type of opioid is a factor in 71.76% of overdoses. Opioids kill more than 3 times as many people as cocaine. Overdose deaths rank just below diabetes in terms of highest death count. Fentanyl is a potent synthetic opioid drug approved by the Food and Drug Administration for use as an analgesic, pain relief, and anesthetic. It is approximately 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin as an analgesic. As fentanyl and its analogs spread through the U.S. illicit drug market and became mixed into all kinds of drugs, including stimulants, deaths skyrocketed. Over the past 20 years, the number of Americans dying from drug overdose surpassed the total number of American soldiers dying in all U.S. wars since World War II. By 2020, at least 2.7 million Americans had an opioid use disorder, a number that is likely an undercount, and fentanyl became the number one killer of Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. When the powers that be from England started the Opium Wars when smuggling heroin into China, they knew the effects that opium would have on large numbers of Chinese who were completely controlled by their opium addictions, wasting their days away in a stupor in opium dens where the drug was made available to them. The English power brokers established a stronghold in China by creating what was known as British Hong Kong and signed a 99-year lease to have an Asian base for control of the opium trade. They later also established a heroin registry in England, where registered addicts could have their heroin and the paraphernalia used to ingest it supplied to them via prescription. The U.S. carried on with enforcing that system by having many wars in Asian opium-producing countries such as Vietnam, where the country was all but destroyed over control of the opium trade. It could even be suggested that the reason for the draft and increasing the number of troops sent there was to provide vessels for heroin to be smuggled to America when the soldiers died in action. Then in 2001, under the pretext of hunting Osama bin Laden, the U.S. invaded the major opium-producing nation of Afghanistan, and during that invasion aligned with criminal gangs that have tripled and quadrupled the amount of opium being produced and shipped out of that region. The boogeyman bin Laden has been a scapegoat for other black ops as well. Actor and filmmaker Peter Berg produced a damning documentary called Painkiller about the Sackler family, the purveyors of OxyContin, which has destroyed millions of lives. These drug companies know how damaging opioid addiction is and how difficult it is to be cured from it. This is the desired result of the plan that was established 200 years ago when England initiated the Opium Wars. We are now seeing a surge in homelessness and opioid addiction that is out of control. We have to become the people who go against this trend and work to save the coming generations from this horrible fate. We need to develop safer, non-addictive medication, stop taking the opioid prescriptions from the drug cartels, and we need to stop experimenting with opiates as a recreational drug. This is the only way to end this planned enslavement of humanity. Links for all of the articles and sources used to create this video will be found in the description below this video. Make no mistake, the Opium War is against us, and we are losing. We are the power that can change this. The end? Stay tuned for more content from All Theory no conspiracy. Thank you for watching.